Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Natalie Himmelrich. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is completely self-funded, produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. Consider making a small donation to support the podcast. Go to bit.ly/support, capital G, capital T, and podcast. I repeat, bit.ly/supportgt podcast. Thank you so much. And for more information, please visit Natalie's website, join the podcast Instagram page, and subscribe to the newsletter to receive updates on future episodes. So welcome to today's episode, and as the season approaches, this is a special episode. We're approaching holiday season, and emotions around grief and trauma can intensify, especially during family gatherings. And so today's episode is with one of my favorite guests for the podcast, Rachel Tenpenny McGonigle now, which we've already heard in episode 1, the first one we did, episode 50, and most recently, episode 88 as part of the series Grieving Parents a Decade Later. And today we're just going to have a conversation, the two of us, to gain insights into dealing with grief and trauma and explore effective ways to manage Christmas and grief and trauma. So we will delve into how to navigate family gatherings when you as a member are dealing with recent loss and or trauma. So as you know, we aim to offer a safe space where you as a listener can find solace, learn and empower yourself through shared experience and professional guidance. And as I said, here today with me is Rachel, and among us we have almost 30 years of experience of, in this case, Christmases without our loved ones that are missing. So welcome, Rachel. Thank you for...
Yeah, thank you for having me, always. I love coming on your podcast.
As we spoke just before starting recording, it's a joy for me to speak to you. That's why we've done this multiple times. We've always got a lot to speak even before we start recording. But this is a little bit special in terms of a specific topic. And as I have heard you speak about this topic around Christmas or the holidays in specifics, why don't you start off by saying the things that you have learned, and then I'll share into what I have noticed in myself and what is important around that time.
Well, the holidays can certainly amplify our grief, and it doesn't mean that there are no other difficult aspects of the year, but the holidays seem to put a pressure on grievers to either be happy, be joyful, be cheerful, focus more on gratitude, and their grief can seem like a burden or a downer, and so they'll try to hide it and fake their way through the holidays. Or there's sort of this opposite response of refusing to have any joy, because that might mean that they're dishonoring their loved one, that people are overlooking the pain that they're still in. And so the holidays can be very confusing. They're overwhelming. They also assault all of the self-care boundaries that I have all of my grieving clients put in place. The holidays are busy. We don't get as much rest. There's lots more unhealthy food and treats and alcohol and exposure, right? Where there's parties we're going to, or there's get-togethers. And, the emotional energy that we're pouring out in the holidays often leaves us feeling lower, ill-equipped, right? More overwhelmed. And so certain safety mechanisms need to be put in place. Some strategy is required in the holidays. And the most important thing I tell all of my grieving clients first is to make sure that you are still taking care of your body. Don't stop taking care of your body just because the holidays have come around. I think sometimes people have this January 1st mentality, right? In the new year, I'll be better. I'll take care of myself. I'll focus on those things more. But if you're grieving, you cannot afford to wait until January 1st, because the toll of your grief and the additional expectations of the holidays deplete you more quickly. They are going to rob you of that emotional energy. And it's also because of the time of year, we seem to be more susceptible to the colds, the germs, right? It's flu season. All of these things kind of hit us all at once. And so if we're not taking care of our body, we're likely to go down and probably go down pretty hard, whether it's with an illness or just with exhaustion and overwhelm. So keep taking your supplements. Eat your healthy, warm food. This is not a time for cold drinks or salads and raw things to eat. Make sure that you watch your coffee consumption and your alcohol consumption. Those things can absolutely complicate the difficulty of already difficult grief emotions. And then the next big important step is to set lots and lots of boundaries for yourself. It is okay to say no to things. It's okay to say no to gatherings or to parties or to limit your exposure, right? Maybe you leave early or you come later or you bring a support person with you so that you have someone to lean on. I used to pack my tea in my purse so that everywhere I went, I always knew I had my tea so that I had a reason to sort of escape and step out for a minute and recompose myself if I felt like it was becoming too much. Because those boundaries are what create that survival path through the holidays. And the great thing about each holiday is the boundaries you choose for this year don't have to necessarily be the boundaries you choose forever. You're allowed to modify your approach to this year's holidays and meet your needs where you're at. And as those needs change, because that's what we do in grief, our capacity changes. You'll be able to set up different boundaries the next year. And so you don't need to be afraid that this is how the holidays will be forever. They won't be anyway forever. They'll be however you decide you want them to be. And you will continue to create new traditions. You will continue to evolve and you will continue to adapt and your needs will change. And so it's all right to do this Christmas the way you need to do this Christmas. And next year you can reassess and do that Christmas the way you want to do that Christmas. Especially when I think grievers have such a fear that if they enjoy the holidays at all, that they're somehow leaving their loved one behind or leaving their loved one out. And rituals and traditions that help you acknowledge your missing loved one can be really important to help balancing the scales there so that a new holiday experience doesn't only mean a holiday experience that leaves out your loved one. You can bring them into it, honor their memory in ways, and that can evolve as well. You can just because you do it one way this Christmas doesn't mean you have to do it that way every Christmas, but it gives you the freedom. It puts the power back in your hands to decide how you want your holidays to look based on all the factors, your needs, your wants, your energy level, your support system, your self-care plan, right? I had a little boy, 16 years ago. So will be my 16th Christmas coming up. And so I had an almost 3-year-old. My son's birthday is January 7th. So at Christmas time, he is almost to his next birthday. So he was almost 3 years old after his sisters died. And I remember having to find that appropriate path where my emotional needs were met and my energy was protected, but also that he got a Christmas that I felt was worthy of a 3-year-old, right? Like he was a little boy and he was excited about presents. And at that point, he still believed in Santa and he wanted to decorate and do cookies. And, we have a lot of traditions in our family leading up, right, to actual Christmas Day. And I did not want him to miss those things. But I also was aware that I was functioning with limited capacity. So I did have to set boundaries and put certain things in place in order to make sure those things happened for him in a way that didn't leave me completely drained, overwhelmed, and then basically in a depression once the new year hit, trying to recover from putting on a holiday that I really wasn't emotionally capable of. And now the holidays are easy, right? They're full of joy and energy. And I don't have to be that strategic about the holidays anymore. But though first, maybe 4, 5 Christmases, I was very tender, very vulnerable. The very first Christmas, my sister also had a baby because all of our babies have always overlapped. So we had our first babies together, our second babies together, our third babies together. But my, second pregnancy, both of my babies died. But her baby daughter was beautiful and healthy, and she obviously brought her to Christmas. And not that I would ever wish that away, but it was something I factored in because, my arms were empty. And I had 2 stockings hung that, for 2 little girls that weren't there. right? We're hanging a stocking for the new baby as well that is there. And I needed to make sure that I was taking care of myself properly so that I could get through that experience. Because even though I was thrilled for her, I was broken on the inside for myself. And it was my responsibility to make sure that I supported myself the way that I needed to. No one else was going to come along and make that Christmas easier for me.
But there's a question, because I mean, I know you as that feisty person that is taking care of yourself even in the first Christmas, in that moment, just a half a year after your girls were born and then died. But someone else might think or feel, well, I can't take care of myself. I don't have it in me to look after myself in the way that you describe. What do I do? What would you say, or what would you suggest to them?
Yes. So, first of all, for anyone who has come to that awareness, like, good for you. Give yourself credit for being able to recognize that the energy that you need, you just don't have. And you're aware of your limitations in that moment. Because that is exactly what allows us to then ask for help. Okay, when we recognize that I can't provide the help that I need to myself from my own energy reserve, then I'm going to need to pull in the support from external sources. So whether that is leaning on someone to be there for you, that's saying no to things and simply not allowing yourself to be stretched too thin. If it's staying in instead of going out, right? It's depending on whether you're introverted, extroverted, your personality, there's some factors. And I would say, this is where working with a grief coach or a therapist or things can be really instrumental, because you get to gain these insights about yourself. And when you understand these things about yourself, then you can protect yourself so much more effectively.
Yeah, you get to strategize depending on how you are.
Yes, how you're built and what you need. Because we are different, and those things we know we need different self-care plans because we're all different. We need different levels of support because we're all different. And then circumstances play in as well. And so that awareness is the first step. So good for anyone who has that awareness. But then we also have to be willing to ask for help and build an external support system if we don't have the internal support system, or we're working on that, right? Our like I always say, our capacity can grow. And I know a lot of people don't like to ask for help. They feel they're a burden, or they don't, they feel that people should just know. They
Exactly,
shouldn't have to
yes.
ask, right? There's lots of reasons why we don't ask for help. But when we are grieving, one of the best gifts we can give ourselves is to get over that resistance and decide to pull in the support when we need it most, if we can't provide it for ourselves. Because just no support, going without, that's an option, but it's an option that comes at a great cost. Not a lot of positive outcomes come from refusing to ask for help, especially when we don't have the help to give ourselves from within. And if you're expecting some good outcome of that, you might need to redirect your expectations, because you either are responsible for your own inner world, or you have to pull in the support that you need. But the support, the healing, none of it happens by magic or by fate or with enough time. There is this participatory, proactive approach that we need if we're going to lead our grief rather than letting our grief lead us. And that includes the holiday season, because the holidays have a way,
season.
yes, of amplifying our pain, what's missing, how quickly people are rushing us through to be better and to be in a better place. And we need to be able to advocate for ourselves, even if advocating means simply asking other people or bringing in other resources, even if it's stuff like hire a housekeeper for the month of December, have groceries delivered for the month of December, things that just take some of that extra energy off your plate, right? And help you preserve it. I actually call it the 30% rule. I tell people, whatever you feel your capacity is, your full capacity, operate only at 30% of it and save the other 70% for your healing needs.
For your emotional work, yeah. So one of the questions that I hear often with my clients is, well, what do I do if my family asks me to move on or look at the bright side or give these gratitude speeches where, oh, why don't you, and give good suggestions, well-meant suggestions, or rush you to somewhere place where you're not, what would you have them do in terms of self-care or drawing in the support that they need? Because that's always a situation, right? Like we're meeting with family, and not just on Thanksgiving, but also Christmas. Family is accentuated, and it's like we don't want people to be sad, and so there's often these comments or these expectations, either they're non-verbal or verbally said, that might bring actually people that have maybe set up a well thought out plan, but they might bring them into in terms of a dilemma with their family.
So one of the challenging things about a grief experience, a loss experience, is it can expose the fact that sometimes our families are actually the people who are the least supportive. We think they should be the most supportive, and we assume that they will be, and we think they will show up well for us. And then sometimes we start seeing that that's not the case, that maybe they are impatient with us, or they have strange views on grief and loss, or they're not dealing with their own grief, and so they're projecting or shutting down. There's lots of reasons. And even though that can be very disappointing and very disheartening to have that realization, the only way forward in that is to then figure out what other support system is available to you instead of trying to force your family to be that support system.
Yeah.
If they don't want to be or are unable to be, we need to let them go and put our energy into developing the support system that is available to us. And oftentimes that's people that we didn't even realize were going to step up for us or show up well for us. Sometimes it's the people we meet in a support group. Sometimes it's our coworkers. Sometimes it's just other people in our life that are not our family that we didn't realize were safer and a better support system. And that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong if you release your family from filling that support need and go find it from people who will fill that support need, even to the point that during the holidays, you are allowed to not go to the family function if you feel it will be too much for you that year and reassess the next year. Or you're allowed to change up how it works. Maybe instead of a very large one, you have a more intimate one. Or maybe you only meet with certain members of your family and they do something separate with everyone if certain people feel unsafe to you or unsupportive for you. But you have to use your voice. You have to ask, you have to say no, you have to say, I would like it to look like this. And that starts with even asking yourself, well, what do I need? Because grief often by default makes us very clear on what we don't want, what we don't like, what isn't working for us. But when we're asked, what do you want? What is working? Often we cannot verbalize it. And the holidays require that we ask ourselves, what do we want the holidays to look like? Not just what we don't want them to look like, because then we can ask for what we need and set up those safety structures so that the support we're getting is meaningful support instead of just bracing for impact and hoping that we just can make it through right before we collapse on the couch and spend a week recovering before the new year. I think that's oftentimes kind of, the default result when we don't have a plan. And I know this sounds tricky because it's going, okay, I am overwhelmed with loss. I am grieving and I'm supposed to have a plan, right? That seems like too much work and effort. Someone else should have the plan, right? People should be helping me more. But the truth is, if you leave it up to others, they will likely disappoint simply because they don't really know what you want and need, not as well as you do. And that little bit of time to get in touch with what you want and need and then plan for it. It's not about controlling it. Okay. A plan isn't control, but a plan is saying, I'm going to give this enough reasonable thought that it's going to likely reduce the chances of me getting completely blindsided by what I don't see coming.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to protect my sleep a little bit more. I'm only going to choose these two, get-togethers that I know are safer than the other ones. I'm going to leave early from that one party. I'm going to tell everyone that I won't be able to get them gifts this year because I simply don't have the emotional capacity to do it, or I'm only writing cards, or whatever modifications we need to make. We need to think through what those are. Because if we're just flying by the seat of our pants in survival mode, just trying to get through the holidays in a fog, it comes at an emotional and physical cost. It does not help our healing efforts. It just becomes another form of coping that sets us back. And then we have to resolve that because now the holidays themselves become a loss.
Exactly. I
We
think it's
didn't
also
enjoy them.
important for people to be given the permission to think about themselves first, to be maybe saying that, or to be egoistical about this is what I need. And it's some people, given their upbringing or their social structure of their family, they're not really used to allow, or not really allowing themselves to think for themselves. And I think after grief or traumatic loss, it is important to just do that. Because yes, you mentioned that family might not be the support that you expect them to be, and that's part of secondary losses. And also to think, well, this is for now. One of the terms that I liked and heard from one of my guests was certain friendships might also not be the ones that you were expecting them to be. So to shelve them for later, because the people don't know exactly what you're going through because they're not at the center of this storm. And your family might be closer to the center, and still they are their own people. They might be really hurting to see you in so much pain, and they want you to come out of it. And they're helpless in their own ways, and it's still your part at the center to say, this is what I need.
Grief is so tricky because it likes to convince us that the way that we feel right in this moment is the way we will always feel. And you add the holidays to that, and suddenly it can feel very hopeless. I can't connect with my family. I don't have good support. All of the traditions are painful. Without my loved one, how will there ever be joy or peace to the holidays again? And if we let ourselves spiral in that place, we can start thinking that we need to make decisions based on all of the pain we're feeling right now, as if it is a permanent state that we will be in. And I think the wisest thing we can do is pause for a minute and just ask ourselves what we need for now. What do we need for this Christmas, for this holiday gathering, for this situation? And choose that, let that be enough, and then reassess later, because you will be surprised at how much your emotions will change, your feelings will change, your capacity will grow, your ability to navigate will shift. And we rob ourselves of hope and opportunity if we decide that this is permanent and there's no other options outside of it. And for whatever reason, especially Christmas time, really likes to magnify that fear of, is this permanent? Is something, especially for me, I'll speak for myself. I've always loved the holidays. They're special to me. I like to decorate, and the traditions and the things we would do as a family, and lighting all the candles to feel that wintry feel, and put fire in the fireplace, and just all of the things that we did. I've always loved the holidays. I look forward to them. And then when I lost my daughters, it felt like it stole the holidays from me. It was bad enough to lose them, and now their loss was stealing other things from my life. And that first Christmas, I had this deep sense of panic that something I loved, another thing that I loved, was also lost forever. And it felt unfair. It felt overwhelming. It felt deeply sad, like there was an ache in me about that. And the best thing I did for myself is I said, Rachel, your feelings are valid, but maybe you're just feeling them this year. Let's see what happens next year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to say it got easier, because the work, I was vested and I advocated for myself and I put myself on a healing path. But like all healing paths, it was slower than I wanted it to be. It had some unexpected twists and turns. But when I got myself to the next Christmas, the difference between the first Christmas and the second Christmas, it wasn't profound. It wasn't like it magically modified to the Christmas of my past. But if I could see even 1% change, then I knew change was possible.
Yeah,
And this
absolutely.
fear that it was permanent was not a true fear. And that next Christmas had a little bit more joy than the one before it. And then the next Christmas, a little bit more than that, to where 16 years later, Christmases are good and they have been good for quite a while. I've had a
Mm.
number of really amazing Christmases under my belt. But it started with just being open to the truth that we are not stuck in a permanent holiday experience.
Mm.
It has
So
the capacity to change.
yeah, one of my clients, she's remembering one of the first sessions that we had, and she said, "I remember you told me you might not believe this, but it will get better." That this is her recollection, but I think in a bit similar way, those people who are listening here, even though you might not believe that this will ever get better wherever you are, just leave open the possibility that it will change, because we don't know what is going to be forever. We don't know that forever. We don't know what's actually happening. So to leave that open. And for us, this is my 13th Christmas without my daughter, and it has definitely changed. And this is due to time, but also due to effort, as you said, or things that have happened that I made happen. And that is a given. I mean, if no belief or no hope, but at least take our experience as a valid option that it can be. I think this is the most we can give those people. So one of the things that I also wondered is, like if someone is in a situation and they might have planned to do that, but suddenly it just stopped working. Sort of the plan or the preparation, the self-care, they've done everything you said, let's assume. And there comes a moment to say, oh my God, I'm at an impasse. What do I do? So, I mean, for me,
Yeah,
it's
David Kessler, he
yeah,
calls it an escape hatch. I think that's his phrase. I usually use the term, you're always allowed to make a new decision. You can reevaluate. Sometimes plans don't go the way you want plans to go. Sometimes we overestimate ourselves and we think we're okay with something and we get
yeah.
involved and we realize we're not. One of my clients in my holiday support group actually was mentioning David Kessler's escape hatch, and I said, because she's like, I knew that I don't have to go to this family function if I don't want to. I can use my escape hatch. And I said, that's true. And I said, and just remember, even if you decide to go and you're already there and then you want to leave, you can. I said, or if you want to leave just for 15 minutes and come back in, you can. Or if you want to stay an hour and then decide, okay, this is too much for me, I'm leaving. An escape hatch isn't only one choice or the other. An escape hatch is giving yourself the freedom to make a new choice if you need to make a new choice. And sometimes we don't know we need to make a new choice until we're right there in it. Something has not gone the way we thought, or we have an unexpected situation, and we can make a new choice. That is how we empower ourselves, by saying, I have the right to make a new choice at any time. And instead of, well, I have to, or I need to, or, but what if people will be upset, or I'm already here? Those things no longer apply when we're in a season of grief, because we don't have the luxury of pushing past our capacity like that. We need to preserve that important emotional energy. We're healing, we're in a healing process. And so giving ourselves permission to make a new choice is what protects us from feeling like we're required to push ourselves beyond our boundaries. Our goal when we're grieving is to stay as far away from the edge of our boundaries as possible, right? To keep ourselves as safe as possible. We don't need to be constantly teetering on the edge of our capacity. And we do that by letting ourselves reevaluate and make new choices whenever needed, right?
So
And here's the Oh, sorry, real quick, I just want to say, and it's not just if something is too much. What I also see often, and especially my clients, and I even recognize this in myself in those early years, it wasn't just if something went bad or wrong or got hard. It was also if I started enjoying myself or having fun or something went better than planned. Even then, I would find myself going, wait a minute. Well, this wasn't exactly what I thought would happen. This wasn't how I expected it to go. And I even had to give myself permission to reevaluate and say yes to the joy. Yes, to the fact that it was going well. Yes, that I was at peace, and almost re-exercise that muscle where things were okay because I had become so accustomed to things not being okay. Everything was hard. Everything was overwhelming. Everything was bittersweet. But this weird thing starts to happen in our healing process where sometimes we just actually enjoy ourselves. And we have to give ourselves permission to let that be okay without the guilt, the fear, what's the catch? When's the other shoe gonna drop? Oh, I must be loving less or forgetting if I'm having fun or enjoying myself, especially around the holidays, because there's this great resistance to not enjoying ourselves. Because what does that say about our grief? What does that say about how much we loved our loved one? They're not here and I am, and here I am enjoying myself. So we'll actually actively resist that. And so part of this escape hatch or this plan isn't just about when things get hard or unexpected. It's also about if they're enjoyable and going well, do we have room for that? Are we allowing that to take place in our life? Are we making a new decision around joy, not just around pain?
So to put a bit of nervous system language around that, I see that often people dealing with grief and trauma, they get into a response that is make them stuck in dorsal or in sympathetic. And so when they experience joy again and they come up to ventral, so their regulation starts to happen in a flow again, they're sort of a bit surprised or shocked or uneasy with that because they've been hovering in the lower parts of the nervous system in terms of the ladder. And so it's like to say, okay, well, this is like practicing that muscle that you say that because the nervous system regulates on a daily basis up and down the ladder. And if those people who want to know more about the nervous system, there's another episode on that, which I put in the show notes. But it's really important to say, well, if the nervous system has been in this blocked space around dorsal and sympathetic, it's okay for it to regulate again. Now, what I remember in my experience, in general, I don't actually know what I need. I remember when someone would ask me, well, what do you need? Or if I would have asked myself, so what do you need? What feels too much? I was often in dorsal, so that's why home away from home. I wouldn't know. I didn't know until it got really too much, and either I would completely disappear or usually I would completely be overwhelmed. And I guess that's where you and we know that that's the benefit of being in care with someone that understands and helps you regulate, helps you understand your nervous system cues or your responses in terms of physical sensations or emotions or behaviors or feelings that you have, to actually track those things while they're happening. But if someone might not have had the luxury and listens to this episode, they might not have the luxury of having had support, and they're listening to this episode and next week is Christmas. If you were to give them sort of just 5 things to look out for, maybe that's self-care or whatever, some specific things. Okay, if nothing else is happening right now before Christmas, these are the 5 to 10 things that make sure that you think about or take a bit of time to prepare for. What would you say?
Let me make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Like 5 things that I think they should look out for, like be aware of coming into the holidays.
So let's say this is a person like me who says, well, I don't know how to plan. I don't actually know what I need. I don't know where my limits are. I'm a bit confused. Like, all sounds good with Rachel saying, but I'm overwhelmed and I might not have the benefit of being with someone like a grief expert like us who can actually help them work out step by step. If we're going to do emergency rescue here and we're giving them 5 drops, what would we give them?
First of all, always take away, so commitments, obligations, all of that, and then add back in if you realize you have the capacity. Don't overcommit and then try to drop things off,
Yeah.
because that is very stressful. It's possible if you have overcommitted and you realize it's too much, you are always allowed to remove things, but it's much more stressful to remove them than it is to err on the side of caution and then realize you can add something because your capacity turns out to be greater than you
Okay.
thought.
So maybe I'll add something to that in terms of sensations or what someone can feel. So, for example, if you have removed all of that, and you might feel your nervous system goes into more openness or curiosity about, so what could happen now, as opposed to being overwhelmed and wanting to be under the blanket, that is a sign that you can add something in. So you start to become more regulated, you start to become open, interested, being able, wanting to connect. That might be a sign, okay, let's take something inside. So that will be an emergency drop
Very
number
good.
one.
Very good point. That's how you connected that to our nervous system was very, because that is so true. We can really feel our anxiety lessen just at the thought, right, of going, okay, I have this openness. I don't have this overburdened schedule. And it allows us to even contemplate, oh, maybe there's room for something, right?
Yeah.
And if we are curious, that means our central nervous system is saying, you're in a good place, right? We're immediately, no way, I can't do it. It's too much. Get
That's
it off,
dorsal.
right? That's dorsal, right? That's absolutely. The next thing is, no matter what is going on in your holiday world, develop a tea ritual. Start drinking tea. Tea is a superfood. It is full of nutrition. It is warm and soothing, but it is the perfect check-in ritual to continue to connect with yourself as well as regulate that central nervous system response. It's affordable, it's delicious, it's enjoyable, it's easy. You can do it in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night. You can do as many times in the day as you need. You can pack it with you, take it where you want to go. It becomes the simplest way to re-invite yourself into emotional and physical connection so that you don't disassociate, neglect yourself, right? Like it really kind of puts a stopgap in pilot we can get into, that survival mode, and breaks it up in a healthy way to say, use this cup of tea and the warmth and the coziness and the nutrition that it offers to spend a little bit of time with yourself, checking in and seeing where you're at. And that tiny little habit really becomes your compass. It guides you through, and not just through the holidays, through anything and everything, but it has been probably one of my most go-to tools for my own healing process. I get all of my clients into a tea ritual, and it matches the holidays, so it feels like a holiday activity when really it's a healing activity. There's just a lot of alignment in a tea ritual, so I would say do that.
So
Go ahead.
to put language to it. So if I imagine doing that as you were speaking, and if I feel the sensation on my hands, the warmth, it's orientation. It's one of the tools to advocate when someone is in disassociation, in dorsal, in not being connected to self, not being connected to the present moment. It's orientation, looking, feeling the sensation of the warmth, connecting to your body. It's regulation back into, let's say if someone is in dorsal, it's regulating back into sympathetic, a bit more activation, and potentially interventional. If someone is very sympathetic, it's regulating into interventional, into calm but safe. So I would say that it's not just about the tea, it's about holding the cup, about feeling the warmth, about feeling it as it enters your body, about smelling it, taking all those sensations in. Super.
Well, that just makes so much sense, because that's why tea really is such an important tool. Many of my clients, especially my, I would say my old school clients, ones that are older, come from a different generation. When I talk to them about a tea ritual, at first, they're kind of like, really? I don't understand this. why it can't be that important. But I say, just trust me, go with it, right? Just do it for me. And then it becomes their most go-to habit. It becomes just this important part of how they self-care for the rest of their lives. And hearing you explain it that way makes perfect. And it's not that I didn't know that, but I have not heard it explained that way, where the entire experience of it is hitting every area of healing support, physical, emotional, restructuring our central nervous system, like you said, orienting us, grounding us, right? It's doing all of these important things that even if we don't realize it's doing, that's what it's doing for us each and every time we have a cup. And when we talk about healing motion or the healing process, it's the accumulation of the healing activities that we do on repeat, right? They add up together and become an exponential return. And that is how we develop healing in our lives. It's not the big thing we do once or the stuff we do every once in a while. It's the little things over time. So a cup of tea, if it's helping us to regulate our central nervous system every single time we drink one, and we drink 3 cups of tea a day. I mean, I'm 16 years in, we could do the math. Not only is that a lot of tea, a lot of nutrition, but it's a lot of moments that my body got
Safety
regulated.
regulation. Yeah.
Yes. And that is part of, and it's not just 1 + 1 + 1, it's exponential. They add up to this healing, right? This evidence of healing in my life and my client's life. But it starts with just the commitment to those little tiny rituals. And the holidays are a great time to take a ritual like that and use it to ground you, because not all of the traditions we want to participate in. We don't have the traditional grounding of the previous year's holiday traditions because some of those might bring us pain, remind us of our loved ones. We haven't quite figured out how to integrate those into our healing process yet. So something outside of that, something new, like a tea ritual, becomes what grounds you so that you can navigate those things more effectively and even come to conclusions and decisions about how you want to move forward.
Good. Third drop
All
off
right,
emergency.
The third one I think would be not to take it personally if the people that you think are going to show up well and support you well don't. Because it isn't personal. It's simply a reflection of our grief-ignorant culture. We're just simply not taught how to show up well for people. We're uncomfortable with our own pain, our own inadequacies, so we often try to shelter people we love from those things. We have lots of skewed filters and myths and misunderstandings about grief that we carry into our relationships that can show up when we're actually experiencing a loss. And so when people don't show up for us well, put pressure on us to feel or be different than we are, rush us through, it's not because it's even about us. It's reflecting their own discomfort and inadequacies. And there's some space for compassion there. I'm not saying that we don't ask for what we need or set boundaries. We can do that. But if we let it become personal, like, why aren't they there for me more? Do they even really care about me or love me? They should be behaving differently. That robs us of that important emotional energy we need to be preserving. And we can just let it go, not take it personally, use that energy to get the support we need elsewhere. And then we can revisit those relationships later. Like I've talked very openly about, I even had this struggle with my own mom. My mother is a wonderful human, but when my daughters died, my mom also happened to be going through her own stuff, and she just couldn't be there for me the way that I really needed her to be there for me. She just couldn't. So, but instead of discarding the relationship, telling her how much she's failed me, I just set that relationship aside, and I took that energy and I went and got the support that I needed. And within a couple of years, I got to a place in my grief where I was able to bring that relationship back in. And we have a wonderful relationship because it wasn't personal. She wasn't abandoning me. She was a human being who was figuring out her own stuff. And I knew that I wasn't willing to throw the relationship away for that. But I also knew that I needed to shelf it for a while and go get the support that I needed.
So to put nervous system language to that is, the picture that came up for me is to look for really good ventral anchors. So to have someone, and you will find someone in your vicinity, maybe not the people that you hope it would have been, but you will find someone who is a really good ventral anchor for you. That means someone who will help you co-regulate, that will be there when you're in dorsal, when you're just like, I can't deal with it, I'm going under my blankets, I don't want to actually see anyone, or when you're really sympathetic, activated into anger, you will have someone who is helping you co-regulate there, who doesn't want to fix you or fade you or move you along where you are not, but will help you manage that. And someone like your mother in the story, she might be just busy regulating her own nervous system and not able to help you co-regulate yours. So it is to put on the glasses of, well, who is a good co-regulator for me in this moment right now? And to have someone, and if you find someone, keep them close. And those who might not be able to be that co-regulator, to say later, maybe not now, maybe later, let's see. And so I think
we just want to be careful that you don't go around throwing away relationships when you are overwhelmed with grief and maybe not in a position to make a full assessment.
Exactly.
Right? Because sometimes our pain will sort of speak for us. And we don't want to make all of our decisions from our pain. We want to go figure out how to get help with our pain so that we can make decisions.
Yeah.
You see how that flows? Go ahead.
Yeah. So let's leave it at those three, because I'd like to end with one of the things that that David Kessler says beautifully. He says, my idea of grieving and healing is to come to a place where we grieve with more love than pain. So it's not about stopping to grieve or forgetting, it's about remembering, but in a way that allows more capacity for regulated grief, for loving and memories and longing, as opposed to the painful grieving that dysregulates you into overwhelm or into activation. Thank you so much, Rachel. This has been great information and great inspiration as always. So people, Rachel's contacts are there in the show notes for you to go and make sure that you go back and listen to episode 150 or 88. In one, Rachel talks about her own story a little bit more, and actually this episode is 2.5 years old, and the most recent one we just recently recorded, the one where we sort of look back over a decade since the loss of our girls. But thank you so much for this episode, for this Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
So we want to wish everyone listening to this a gentle holiday season. If you need help or support, reach out. Reach out to your group, your peer support group that you might find that support you, that understand where you are, or find someone that can support you in where you're at.
Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to my newsletter on nataliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep breathing. I promise it will get easier.